Gentlemen, welcome to the joint meeting of the Columbia 911 Board of Directors and our joint advisory committee meeting. We'll start by first of all reminding everyone to sign in if you haven't done that. There's a sign-in sheet back there on that table, and Mary Jo was kind enough to remind me to remind you all to sign in. We'll go ahead and start with calling the roll of our board of directors. I will say that our member Jeff Flatt will be here. He's going to be a few minutes late. And our chair, Bruce Holsey, is not going to be here today because his grandfather passed away and his services are this morning. So I'm Henry Heimiller, the vice chair, and we'll be co-chairing this meeting today. And we'll start over here with Rob.
Present.
Shall we?
All right. Do you want to introduce staff?
Sure. 911 staff present is Nathan Hughes, technical manager, Mary Jo Beck, admin support, Nancy Edwards, CFO, Danelle Hooper, operations manager, Chandra Egan, CAD specialist, Alex Edinger, training coordinator, and Merck Levine, IT and facilities. I'm Mike Fletcher, I'm the director.
Okay, and I'll punt to my esteemed colleague, Mike Russell, the chair of our advisory committee.
Thank you, Chair Heimiller. I'd like to call the meeting of the 911 Communications Advisory Committee to order. My name is Mike Russell. I'm the advisory committee chair, and I'd like the other members to introduce themselves. We'll start on that far end of the table.
Chief Greg Brody, Westport Fire.
Lieutenant?
Lieutenant Florence Caboose, Police Department.
Sergeant Sean Carnahan, Virginia Police Department.
Over here at the end.
Rob Davis, Deputy Chief, Virginia Fire.
Joe Kaczynski, Fire Chief, Miss Burkeville.
Ryan Murphy, Columbia County Sheriff's Office.
Eric Smythe, Deputy Chief, Columbia River.
Joel Medina, Fire Chief, Columbia River.
Evan Eustace, St. Helens PD.
Jerry Coleman, Battalion Chief with the Columbia River.
Steve Sherrick, Class 9 Fire District Fire Chief. Josh Marks, Deputy Fire District.
Jerry Barker,
And we'll go ahead and have others introduce themselves, guests as well. We'll start back in the corner there.
Jason McCoy, Oregon Department of Forestry.
Jeremy Hazelkamp, Columbia City PD.
Pete McHugh, City of Scappoose.
Don Lake, State Communications.
Will Mullins, State Communications.
Joe Backus, Amara Scappoose.
Kim Holmes, City of Scappoose. Alex Rain, City Manager for Scappoose.
Tyler Miller, City of Scappoose.
Thank you all.
Okay, with that, thanks everyone for being here. It's an important day for us to hopefully dial in on this discussion of our new radio system potential, and glad everyone took time out of their day to be here. Now it's time on our agenda for public comment. Anyone who would like to address the board, please go to the podium back there and give us your name and city of residence for the record. This is our time for public comment. I'm going to ask for this 3 times. Anyone who'd like to address either the advisory committee or the board of directors, now's your opportunity to do so. And this will be third and final call for public comment. Anyone who'd like to address us here today?
It appears there's nobody online, is that correct?
Nathan?
That's not true. Jeff Richards, Scappoose Fire is online.
Oh, hey, Jeff, hang on just a minute. Did you want to address us during public comment here?
No, sir, but I heard a comment that nobody was online.
Okay, well, we appreciate you being here, but we are having some technical difficulties. It sounds like we're going to, as soon as Nathan gets back here, get your volume taken care of and see if we can't bring you up on the screen. Thanks for weighing in there. Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and close our public comment opportunity. Is there any additions to our agendas, either one for the day?
None from staff.
Okay. Anything, Mike, from advisory committee as far as an agenda addition?
Any additions to the agenda?
Oh,
None.
okay, we'll go ahead and move in, then this is shifting over to the regular board business stuff here. This will be the potential approval of the November 17th, 2022 board meeting minutes. Directors?
So move.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded to approve the minutes from November 17th, 2022. This is our regular board meeting. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Now is an exciting part of our agenda here today, which is the potential appointment of a new advisory committee member. We have Chris, I'm sorry.
Yep. Lieutenant Chris Fluell.
Yeah, I missed the lieutenant part. I had a chance to meet him here a little while ago. It was our pleasure to meet you, and your name has been submitted by the city of Scappoose to be the alternate on the advisory committee. So anything you'd like to say to our board here, Chris, in way of introduction?
Brand new to this particular area. I'm just glad to be here in Columbia County and work with all of you. So thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you, Chris. Do I have a motion from the board of directors for approval of Chris to be the alternate for the city of Scappoose?
I'll make a motion that we have Lieutenant Chris Fewlin?
It's
Fluellen.
like the virus. I don't like the
Fewlin. More.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve Lieutenant Chris Fluellen to be the alternate for the city of Scappoose on the advisory committee. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate you doing that, and welcome aboard.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Moving right along here into our financial reports. We'll have our budget variance report first. Nancy, anything out of the ordinary that we should
Everything's
be
looking
aware
good.
of?
You
They
have
look
just
good?
the month of November in front of you.
Okay.
So, Chair, I move to approve the budget variance report as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded to approve the November budget variance report as presented. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Now it's time on the agenda for the approval of the check register. It was presented in our packet.
So, Mr. Chair, move to approve the expenditures, starting with check number 31115 through 31182, and, 31183, with the electronic transfers and payments for a grand total of $364,368.23.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded to approve the approval of expenditures as presented. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, Nancy, you want to talk about the transfer of funds?
Included in your packet is a motion to be read into the minutes to transfer funds from our reserve fund to our general fund.
Okay, and the purpose of this is?
It's for our budgeted appropriations.
Okay.
So moved.
Is there a second? And just a note for the record that we're welcoming Jeff into the meeting. Thanks for
Rob,
being here.
Can you actually read
You
the
read it?
motion?
Yes.
Yes, please.
So, yes. Chair, move to transfer $1,100,000 from the general fund to the equipment reserve fund, and $100,000 from the general fund to the revenue loss reserve fund, as appropriated in the 2022 through 2023 fiscal year budget.
Thank you. Second stands. Okay, it's been moved and seconded to transfer the $1.1 million from the general fund to the equipment reserve fund and $100,000 from the general fund to the revenue loss reserve fund as appropriated in the 22-23 fiscal year budget. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, 2023 business mileage rate.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the IRS reimbursement rate for mileage per the IRS 2023 guidelines which increased 3 cents per mile this year.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and 65.5 cents now. Moved and seconded to approve the new IRS standard mileage rate for 2023 as described. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay. Mike, are you going to do this
Yes.
GFOA presentation for us? Man, this is amazing.
It is. So I'm happy to announce to everyone that the district has received for the 21st time the National Distinguished Budget Presentation Award from the, who are these folks? These are the
Government Finance Officers
Officers
Association.
Association. Thank you. For everybody, GFOA congratulates all budget award winners for presenting and preparing a high-quality budget document that meet programs' criteria and striving to improve budget transparency in their community. Each year, only 1,700 awards are presented, and this district has received this award for 21 years consecutively. This is a direct result of Nancy Edwards and really Mary Jo's hard work and development of our budget. So congratulations.
Good work, you guys. I remember a time when Columbia 911 was the only agency in the county that received this award, and I think it's something that many of our districts and agencies, including Columbia County, have strived for, and a lot of it has had to do with the leadership of Columbia 911, especially Nancy, being really focused on doing things to the standard that produces this award. So I think we've run out of wall space, haven't we?
Go around the corner.
We'll have to start sending some to Nancy's house for her. Okay, congratulations. Good work, you guys. Okay, next topic, which is a big topic, is our next gen radio system discussion. You know, we've had this conversation for 5 years, talking, planning, trying to figure out what we want to do to move into the next generation, what we're going to do for a new radio system to take us hopefully another 20 years down the road. And man, we've chewed a lot of cabbage on this, and hopefully we can get some consensus and move toward that. So Mike, I think I'm going to kick it to you, if that's all right, so that we can talk with, you can talk to your advisory committee folks, and we can hopefully come up with some kind of a consensus here today as a direction that the board should proceed in as we move forward.
I agree. That's what I'd like to get out of today's meeting, and so thank you, Chair Heimler. I was remiss. There's actually 9 folks online. I didn't realize that when we were introducing each other. Can you go ahead and read off who's online, please?
Yes. We have call-in user, citizen, Brian Greenway, Brian Pixley, Earl Smith, Stephen Lugo, and Louis Steinweg, and Kirk.
Can we bring those folks up on the screen?
No, unfortunately, it's just the video feeds that go up.
Okay.
We're still kind of getting used to this.
So this, okay, all right.
Yeah, that's why I didn't. I thought there was nobody online. So anyway, I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to start out by saying, take a little chair's privilege here. So this is starting my 5th year here in Columbia County, and one of the things that struck me when I first got here was the strong coordination, collaboration between agencies within the county. There's nothing like it, honestly, that I've seen in the state. The way we work together, the way we function, the way we collaborate. It's really incredible, and I'm hoping that the establishment of those relationships over all these years, we can come to and work towards a solid recommendation for the board today. And looking forward to Rajit's presentation, and hoping that we can come together behind a solution, and once a decision is made by the board, that we can support you going forward. it's going to be multi-million-dollar ask of the taxpayer, so I think it deserves the time and effort that it's taken. But we need to move forward and support the board moving forward. And so I'm hoping that's my hope for this meeting today. And so look forward to your presentation. And with that, Rajit, would you like to begin? Or Mike, did you have any?
Just a couple points. Rajit, we've asked, just for a reminder for everybody, the district contracted with Federal Engineering a couple of years ago to represent us, to guide us, to educate us, and ultimately to give us a recommendation, regardless of what it may be. And that's what they're here for. They've been paying attention to all of our conversations for these past 2 years. I forward them your comments, your questions, input from across the board. And they're here again today to help facilitate this conversation. We are asking Federal to be the facilitator to your dialogue. We're hoping that you guys engage in questions. We're hopefully being able to provide you answers. We specifically did not invite the vendors here. We want a free and open conversation without any awkwardness. I did ask Ron Policone to join us. He's the manager of the WCN system. That's specifically here to answer questions that either Federal does not know of the inner workings of the WCN system, and certainly none of the vendors have that deep of a understanding of what that solution, potential solution, provides to the users. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff and Rajit to guide us for the next couple hours, I hope.
Great, thank you. So kind of take a step back as far as the process that we've undertaken over the past couple of years. Like Mike said, we were initially retained to come up with a needs assessment based on the stakeholders. So we had interviews, we had site visits, and so forth. We then went ahead and came up with, based on Mike's guidance at the time, 4 different alternatives that we looked at for the Columbia 911 district. And we've come to this board, I want to say it's probably been 1.5 years at this point, and presented that and gave our opinion as far as what would be the best alternative of the 4. And to kind of go over those 4 real quick again was a VHF system, a 7,800 megahertz system that would be just Columbia 911s, and then 2 of the regional systems, one being WCN and the other CRESA, as far as joining a regional system to provide enhanced coverage and enhanced functionality and interoperability. And the outcome of that overall alternatives report and what we presented was to join a regional system for a number of factors, including the installed base and coverage that a regional system would provide, the level of support and maintenance that would be provided as well, the fact that a new core would not have to be purchased, which is again a cost savings in addition. All these are essentially add up to cost savings. And a new core, so not a new core, but leveraging existing cores of the regional system, and not to mention the level of interoperability that would be achieved would be immeasurable compared to other ways of interoperating. Of course, if you go at your own, you could have ISSI connections and so forth, but these regional systems, including WCN, have established connections already with the state, with the city of Portland, and so forth. So allow all the public safety users on the system to be able to interoperate with whoever you choose to, and set up talk groups and so forth. So for those reasons, that was our opinion and our professional opinion and recommendation. After all these sessions and kind of time and all the information flow, we as a Federal Engineering still stand by the thought process of joining a regional system based on new information that's come up from being able to purchase equipment from Clackamas, as well as the effectiveness of joining a system such as WCN. Essentially, what we did the full analysis and so forth before stands to this day. And I think one thing that was very clear over the past month or so is, the stakeholders have very concrete coverage needs, and rightfully so. And so one thing we had done during the conceptual design was really to be able to design to those needs with a number of additional sites, regardless of whichever direction the county district, the district went. So one thing is clear, that regardless of the decision made here today and the approach is definitely that requirements for that particular vendor, or if it's vendors, needs to be established, and we of course can, we've talked to Mike, and that's something we can do based on our work with the district to make sure that the needs of the stakeholders are met, because it's very clear just having one vendor do something and another vendor do something, it doesn't work. It doesn't work for the stakeholders, it doesn't work from a decision-making process, and so whatever direction is chosen, those requirements can be easily established by us because of the fact that we've gone through this process with the stakeholders and understand what those coverage needs are, and can articulate that in the form of specifications that need to be adhered to. So obviously I'm speaking right now of coverage, but there's other requirements as well, but coverage we know is really the biggest issue with all this public safety users having gone through this process over the last couple of years. And we want to make sure that that's addressed by whichever, irrespective of what system ends up being the right system for Columbia County 911. With that said, it's kind of broad overview. Obviously, we're open to taking questions on any topic. And yes, sir.
Joel Medina, Columbia River. We've had a lot of stuff thrown at us over the past few months. Main question that I want to know is, what's behind the curtain? In other words, from federal engineering's position, I hear Motorola, I hear Tate, I hear everybody. What are we missing? What are we not hearing? There's got to be something. There's got to be a so what at the end of the road. Is there anything that we should know that we don't know yet?
I mean, so speaking to those particular, and you're probably referring to like the presentations and the emails and stuff. Yeah, yes. I mean, and that's kind of what I appreciate bringing up the question. That's part of what I was trying to explain, is that it was very clear from both those presentations that there was aspects of an overall solution that were missing. And so, not to say they can't be done, it's just to your point of what's behind the curtain. That's where the specifications are very important, because it addresses not just the radio needs, it addresses not just subscribers, it addresses the backhaul, it addresses the site infrastructure. That's a fairly expensive cost component that was represented in different ways by the various vendors that have presented. So it really would be a full holistic solution to your point, so that there isn't anything when you're in contract, whether it's to join the WCN or to go at your own, that contract would be very binding and would cover all the aspects, so that there is not that where's the gotcha, where's the what's the missing piece, and that's a fair comment, because I think each one of these has certain aspects that are missing in certain ways, and that's something that when we went through the conceptual design process, we were clear to include all aspects, the microwave, the radios, the actual radio infrastructure, the actual system infrastructure development. And again, I'm not saying that's going to be the final design, because obviously the final design is going to be based on the vendor, but they're going to have to adhere to the requirements that are put forth. Yes, sir.
Jeff Pritchard, Scappoose Fire. I appreciate my colleague asking that question. I think it's very important, so I'd like to expand on that just a little bit.
Sure.
To be more specific, there have been a lot of pros talked about. I want to hear about the cons. I want to hear about the negatives. I feel as though sometimes we get lost in all of the greatness when we're looking at a system we can invest in at a reduced rate. Please don't mistake the intent of my question. As we make a commitment, we get behind supporting Columbia 911, I need to make sure that I'm going to my bosses and our community and saying, we have vetted everything. So again, understanding the negatives, the cons of going with some of these systems, I think is kind of what we want to know.
Yeah.
In addition to that, you had mentioned something about binding contracts. One of our biggest fears is getting lost in the mix. If we are to join with another agency, it is paramount that we have a vote at the table. There are lots of agreements and examples, at least on the fire side of things, on how when one agency has a large stake in a project, no decisions are made without involving all of the stakeholders, irregardless of who, quote unquote, owns the system. And for our communities, investing in technology, which changes rather quickly, I want to make sure we don't end up in a situation where all of a sudden we're going to be stuck with a bill in 10 years or even 8 years. Oh, you got to upgrade now. So that's our question.
If I may just tag on to my esteemed colleague here from Scappoose. Sure. Because what I don't understand, and maybe your opinion, how could there be so much difference in the two presentations? I mean, the dollar amount, there's significant difference.
Oh yeah, and absolutely.
Why? I mean,
because
if we're asking for one thing,
right,
and we have come to a consensus that this is what we're looking for, why is there such a difference?
And it's a great question. It's because it's the process that's being undertaken. There's really two processes here that can be undertaken, and hopefully will answer your question as well. The one process of building your own system really needs to go through an RFP process, because right now you're getting information, deferring technologies, deferring designs, and all that from various vendors, because they're not adhering to a technical specification that's part of a request for proposal. When they do that, that balances out and basically levels the playing field for all aspects of the criteria you care about as first responders. What's your coverage going to look like? What's your capacity? What's the interoperability? Is the backhaul going to be reliable at a 5 nines reliability? So these are all aspects. That's why you're seeing various dollar views. Some vendors are not including the site infrastructure costs. Others don't have microwave. So there's pieces completely missing, kind of to your point earlier, Chief, about what's behind the curtain. Well, there's a lot, because right now it's just information coming at you without a set of requirements that they're adhering to. When you go through an RFP process, for the case where you're building your own system, you would have multiple vendors, maybe not just one or two you've heard from, but others that would perhaps be interested in responding to the RFP and providing a design that meets your needs, providing a cost element that obviously, when you're in a competition, which is what an RFP process is, people do sharpen their pencils. And then you have the ability to, as whoever the selection committee is, to be able to identify what are the pros and cons, with, of course, assistance from your consultant, as far as what are the pros and cons of each design and cost, and then make a decision that way. Right now, there's no one level playing field, because everyone's just providing you with quotes on this and that, and it doesn't have all the elements that you would need in order to make a concerted decision for that piece of it.
So is that the next step? That would be an RFP process? Because part of this process is that we've said there's this opportunity to buy Motorola equipment.
Yes.
And so that locks us into Motorola.
Correct.
So if that's what's conflicting for me, is that I wasn't under the impression we were going to go with an RFP process. I thought we were going to go either with a sole procurement, sole whatever it is,
direct procurement.
Yeah, direct procurement.
Yeah.
Or go with a cooperative purchase agreement or something like that. So that's what's conflicting for me. Is it sounds like some of the smaller decisions we make lock us into a direction.
Sure. So to your point, so when I'm explaining the process, I was just trying to address the question of why they're getting varying things. Our opinion has been and continues to be is to join regional system. So as a result of that, to your point, sir, yes, absolutely, you would then have a directed procurement. And again, because of the advantages of joining the regional system, in our opinion. And again, some of that stuff that, as far as votes and all, I will let Ron speak to, because he'll know the ins and outs of the WCN to satisfy some of the gentleman's questions as far as how does that work, as far as once you're part of the WCN, how does it evolve, and how do you have a vote, and how do you, and very good questions, and I'll defer to Ron on that. But from a perspective of the step before that, as far as joining a regional system such as WCN, I think there's numerous advantages, and which we of course articulated in our conceptual design. But one of them is, of course, there's already an existing footprint which you're adding to, so that again helps to alleviate the cost. You have a great support mechanism that you're in. So to the point is you're cost sharing some of that support, because there's X number of sites, and yes, you're adding some sites, but that helps from that perspective. There's already a core, which is a very expensive portion of a system that you're tying into, that already has ISSI connections to various other entities. That again is another cost saving. So for all those elements, and not to mention, as you go into trying to fund this thing, a regional system gets a lot more grant funds than a go it your own system. There's proof across the country on that. So for a number of these reasons is why we believe a directed procurement to join the regional system is WCN is the right approach. But I also wanted to explain why the differences are happening from what they're seeing from Tate, Motorola, others at this point. It's simply because it's not been a streamlined process in terms of them responding to a set of requirements. So that's why you're seeing varying differences between them, and you can get lost in it.
You saw one presentation that was current, a different set of rules. And you saw another presentation that was from an RFI, was it 2 years ago?
Right.
Different set of rules. Very confusing. I'm sitting in the audience, and I do this for a living, and wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. And then started looking into it. Okay, we have 2 different sets of rules here. So you saw 2 different presentations, which I'm sure confuse a lot of people. If we do a directed procurement, if that's where the county wants to go, there's still a set of rules. You guys all have to get together and we'll come up with a set of rules. It has to do this. And you can direct it towards a vendor. Because there's certain benefits. You have to weigh all this out. We can do an RFP and everybody gets it. Or you can do a directed procurement. Still a set of rules, still a contract, you still have to meet the needs of the first responders and the citizens of the region.
Well, in an effort to direct things towards the vendor, where I'm losing it is, how can there be such a difference in coverage between the presentation from Tate and the presentation from Motorola if we're all asking for the same thing? Now, I want you to understand that I ask that not on behalf of myself necessarily, but on behalf of public safety. That means police and fire. Because Columbia River runs the I-30 corridor.
Sure.
So we're going to get good coverage no matter what. But I can tell you this, if I'm a police officer and I'm up on Scotland Highway or somewhere up there, and I'm sitting by myself, and all of a sudden I pull somebody over, my radio better work.
Absolutely, Chief.
And those, I mean, because we run in pairs and fours and, and sixes. You're a police officer, you are all by yourself.
Oh, absolutely.
So I'm compelled to ask the question, why is the coverage difference so different?
It's a simple answer, because there was no set of requirements provided to them. I didn't provide a set of requirements and specifications. I don't know what information they used. It sounded like Motorola looked at RFI stuff from a few years ago. Tate, I'm not sure how they were directed as far as the coverage. So I can tell you at this point, we were not involved in any set of specifications. And that's where I get back to if it was an RFP process that they were responding to, there would be a set of specifications. And it wouldn't just cover coverage, to your point, Chief, but cover all aspects of user needs that we've gathered over the last few years, and basically allow the users to then decide, okay, this is the coverage requirements we had, this is vendor A, B, C, this is what they've provided, and then make a informed decision based on that. What I unless there's some set of documents I'm not aware of, that's the reason why you're seeing 2 very disparate set of coverage from what you saw back in December from Motorola and Tate.
Yeah, because I mean, you're talking about Motorola.
I'm sorry. Chief Deputy Davis has been waiting
Go ahead,
patiently.
It's my turn.
Yeah, be my guest.
Yes, sir.
I mean, I guess I have three things, and one of those, and I appreciate you bringing up the coverage map, right? Because what we saw was vastly different in the presentation.
That I agree.
I think Chief Marks and I both brought up the fact that we know today that we have additional coverage above and beyond what the Motorola presentation showed. We know that because I can drive into those areas where that presentation shows zero coverage and have a great link back to the WCN network and hear everything perfectly and transmit from those locations. So we know that it's better than what it is, and I think that speaks highly that maybe that wasn't a level playing field of what that presentation
Absolutely.
was. I guess my next question, and Ron, this may be for you. I know from a fire standpoint, the concern is if we join a regional network such as WCN, if in 5 years you guys decide, hey, we're doing something different and we can't afford that, right? I think this goes back to Chief Pritchard's question is how do we, if we join that regional network, how do we get a seat at the table to be a part of that solution going forward? As obviously we're investing a significant amount of money for a smaller county into joining that system. And I'm all for joining a regional network. I think it's the right thing for us to do based on some of our needs. But I do understand where the other chiefs are coming from and saying, if we buy in, how do we know that we're not just going to get pushed out and shoved into something else later?
So first of all, WCN, it sounds like it's a tightly coupled entity, but in reality, what it is a partnership between three entities. So WCN is nothing more than a very abbreviated way to say there's three cooperating governments, WACA, C-800 Group, and Newburgh, and it just was too much to say all the time, so we abbreviated it. So it's not really anything other than an abbreviation of that partnership. Each of the entities, if you will, within that partnership own and operate their own stuff. Newburgh owns and operates their site in this case. They manage and own their own dispatch center. Their backhaul segments that they tie into the system are theirs. If they chose at any one time, I'm using them just because it's the easiest one to address. If they chose at any one time to go their own way, all they would have to do is buy a core, plug it in, have a nice day. They're on their own. There is no table that anyone sits at because there is no governing body. It's three cooperating government entities and the agencies that exist within or are supported by, because they're kind of focused around the PSAPs, if you will. So that's been the way that it's been organized. And C-800's in the same boat. If they chose to pull the plug, they would increase their costs to separate their core because it's a backup instead of a primary. And so they would just add some cost to that. They would disconnect if they chose to and go their own way. WACA could at any time if they chose to do the same thing. But it's in no one's best interest to do that by virtue of the fact that all of that overlapping coverage and all that support and all of those cost benefits are the reason for the relationship. There's no governance, if you will, involved in the process. It is a sharing of technology. I'm sorry, probably answering your question as well. Sharing of technology, sharing of processes, leveraging a single core system, whatever that core system is, whether it's fire station learning, radio, paging, all of those systems. It's just a way to leverage the investment, but it doesn't mean that anybody can't walk away or choose a different direction. We've chosen, again, to save money by, if you will, purchasing power of the three entities. Whatever the contract is, whether it's Motorola or, again, going back to fire station learning or whatever. And then leveraging the technologists that we have supporting it. Rather than each group having their own technology group, there's a major economy of scale that you get by having a central organization. I know you guys understand that. The test equipment, vehicles, personnel, all of that, training. But in the end, there's nothing that would bind you other than what benefit you would seek for the purpose of interoperability, leveraging coverage, leveraging systems, and reducing costs. If that doesn't work, then obviously you can be your own entity in whatever shape and form you might want to. So you've had your hand up a lot back there.
So Jeremy Husenkamp, I spent 18 years out here as a state trooper, and I worked all over the state on the SWAT team. So I've experienced interoperability, switching radio stations, and all that. I worked a lot in Washington County and Portland, quite a bit. And I'll be honest, the Motorola system there locked a lot of users out. There was not a lot of input into interoperability with the other systems, people coming onto that. We were actually denied radios because our agency wouldn't put up the money for the user fees for the having pack sets and mobiles on there. We actually had to get grants at some point just to put 800 radios to get coverage on Highway 30 for backing up in Portland because the PSAP's really hot. So I guess my question is, has that improved? And when you guys did your survey, talking to these folks, did you also ask the question of how much interoperability with Washington County and Portland do we need, or do we want interoperability with the partners out here? I still work as a reserve out here. Interoperability with the partners such as KRPUD, which is going to have some sort of radio network, the school districts. Do we look at that as those folks being partners more so than Washington County or Portland? Because I could think of, unless I was near Savi's Island or going in there, very few times that I need to actually have interoperability with Portland, where we couldn't have an interoperability channel or a patch done to deal with it. So I guess that's my question to you. When you guys did your interoperability study, did you look at those things as well? And then my second question to follow up to that is, hearing what you say about an RFP, what's the reason for not going forward with that so that we can look at all the systems and get everybody doing a presentation that puts, I'm a business owner now. I'm all about numbers and make sure that we have, everybody's giving me all the information so that we can look at it. Because again, direct purchases sometimes can lock you into something that may not be the best for going forward for the county. So I guess I'll leave that with you folks on both those
I'll
points.
answer the first question.
Yeah, sure.
So let me catch your first question. I'm going to try to put it in the frame of time. When were you having issues as far as radios being?
Well, I left the state in 2017.
Okay,
again,
so this was the old analog system.
It is, and I know how quickly stuff changes. Even in the last year and a half since you had the presentation, or you guys put the presentation together, I'm sure technology is eons ahead. So that's why I guess my main thing would be to ask, why not go forward with as a taxpayer here in the county, why not go out for another new RFI and or RFP other than I get it would circumvent work, make it easier, but if that saves taxpayers on the backside and looking at something that's going to go for 10 to 20 years, why would we not look at what those options are?
You do that one.
Okay. So to your point, so one of the things about obsolescence and stuff, and I think it answers the chief's question too, is it true that you have a system upgrade assurance plan with the?
We have an SUA and SUS.
SUS, yeah. So part of this concern, which again, we have lots of clients that have made major investments in infrastructure, is a refresh of the equipment over periods of time. So it helps to keep the system more up to date and so forth. So that part I wanted to just get out before I answer the gentleman's question. So as far as the RFP process versus a directed procurement, you're right. If you're looking to build your own system, an RFP, as I mentioned earlier in our discussion, is the right approach. As far as taxpayer and saving money, if you're looking at the cost component, it's very hard to make a case that RFP would be a more cost-effective solution than joining a regional system for the various reasons I pointed out. One is there's already a fairly good coverage footprint. I know it's only on the southern part of the county, but there is a coverage footprint that provides coverage, so it makes it that there's less investment required by Columbia 911 District in order to meet the coverage needs of the first responders. Number two is there's already existing core, which, as was mentioned here, is a very expensive piece of the architecture of a system. So as a result, you have that cost saving as well. There's the maintenance cost savings. If you build your own system, you have to maintain the system all on your own, as opposed to the economies of scale that are garnered from a regional system. So those are three of the big ones, not to mention the ISSI connections if you do want to connect with other partners. And again, when we did the assessment, we were looking at interoperability amongst the public safety agencies within the Columbia County primarily, but there was needs brought up where they would love to have, even if it's not communicating with other folks, be able to roam to certain other areas, whether it's prisoner transport or whatever, to be able to have that connectivity back to their dispatch, and which you would have from a system
So I guess
such
my
as
question
WC.
to that is, did you guys look at this, again, the state system has issues or whatever, but it seems like we're talking about leveraging tax dollars and having partners like ODF and all these others that have stuff here. Did you guys also look at an interoperability with the state system and having sort of our system with augmenting with what the state system has?
So right now,
Go ahead, yeah, go ahead,
Right
yeah.
now, we have ISSI with the state, so that's one means of interoperable communications.
But I'm talking about their microwave and all that, because I can tell you back in the
So I wanted to just interject. I'm sorry to do this, but we need to limit the conversation to the advisory committee members. And I appreciate the questions, but this is the advisory committee to provide guidance to the board, so I want to limit it to advisory committee members. Thank you.
I need to jump in for just a couple seconds here. One, after I make my comment, I'm going to turn it to Nathan because I'm guessing we have advisory people with comments, questions. So, and then second, I will address, when I started here, I did an interview of every single public safety agency in the county. To your point, what do you do today while you may be a fire department? You have the same overall mission, but how you do your mission can differ greatly from a Columbia River Fire to Miss Merkenfeld. I did those conversations and surveys. Who do they talk to today? Who don't they talk to, but they would want to talk to in any new system? All that data has been collected, collated, and provided. That's for every single agency. Columbia 911 was formed by the voters of this county to do really 3 or 4 things. That was take 911 calls, emergency calls for service, take non-emergency calls, and dispatch police, fire, and medical. That is our mission. That is Columbia 911's mission today. We don't exclude anybody else from joining our system. If the Parks Department, the Port, PCC, a school or a school district, or all of them want to join, absolutely. We're not opposed to that at all. What we are required to do is to provide service to our core mission partners. That's police, fire, medical. And that's what we're funding a system for. Others can join on. We have no problem with that.
So yes, online. Chief Pritchard had his hand up a little while ago. Did you still have a question?
I'll wait for our colleagues online.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Pixley, your turn.
Thank you. I have a comment and also a question. So my comment is, it's very easy to look at a map of Columbia County and see what the major thoroughfares are that all connect to Highway 30. When both Tate and Motorola did the presentations, there was a pretty glaring difference in coverage. And when I asked Motorola about that, they said, well, there should be coverage there. My deputies are out on Skypus Community Highway or Avery. They need to be guaranteed they're going to have, when they push that button to talk to dispatch or one of their agents, someone's going to come, someone's going to actually acknowledge their need for help. And I just didn't feel that we got that with Motorola. So why would we ever potentially sign on with a contract with a company that can't guarantee the coverage that we need here in Columbia County? But my question is, you guys are talking a lot about interoperability. Couldn't we have the same kind of interoperability with either company, either Tate or Motorola?
So I'll take your first question, I guess, first. So again, Motorola, at least to my knowledge, we did not provide any type of specifications, whether it pertained to coverage or any other key aspects for first responders in this county to adhere to. To your second part of your first question, why would we sign up to a contract? We, as your consultant, would make sure you would never sign up to a contract with anybody that does not meet your needs. And how we would do that is to make sure that the design that's proposed checks all the boxes and meets all the needs that are in the specifications, and then go through the negotiation process to iron out any other loose ends before you sign a contract that then has to be adhered to, because there's coverage requirements, so they have to do coverage testing to show that they meet those requirements. Should they not, they would be deficient on the contract, and then have to the contract language would specify they would have to, at their own cost, beef up the coverage to meet the requirements. And I'm just giving coverage as a requirement. That would be the case for pretty much all other aspects. So there's a lot of steps between. Again, I'm not sure what requirements Motorola was given, if any, but there's a lot of steps between where we are today and actually being under contract with a vendor that we would make sure to protect Columbia County's interests and make sure that the requirements are met as specified and are adhered to before contract signing. So I guess, any follow-up to their first question?
No, thank you.
Okay. The second question, sorry, what was the second question again?
So you guys are talking a lot about interoperability.
Oh, that's right.
Being able to talk to other agencies. Wouldn't we have the same?
Yes.
The same system, or the same options or access with either system?
Yeah. So fair point. So if you're looking at it from a vendor by vendor, absolutely, they're all adhered to P25. B25 offers a lot of options that we've talked about here today in terms of interoperability, in terms of having even differing manufacturers for different types of radios. It's a standard and was developed for public safety by public safety for that exact reason. The connectivity of the ISSI connections to whether it be state or other regional partners, should they be important, can also be done by any of the vendors' systems. What I think we're talking about today with the specific WCN example was those interoperability connections are already established. So not to say that any other vendor cannot do that. It's just that there's already established connections. So should Columbia County Public Safety be a partner in that system, they would essentially have access to all those established connections and be able to roam across all those areas and talk back to dispatch here, and also, of course, if needed, interoperate with any other partnering agencies in those jurisdictions. So that's I just want to clarify. Yes, P25 allows for interoperability. That's a staple of the platform. It's just the way it's already set up is really what we're trying to point out.
Sure. Looking at
Sheriff Bixley, I had the same observation as you, and it was obvious to me, just as a layperson, that Motorola would need to add more radio sites to provide the coverage that we saw from Tate. So that's adding more cost, because they were heavily focused on using existing sites, Motorola was, and so it was obvious to me that if we were going to get the same coverage, Tate proposed 14 sites, and so obviously I think Motorola would have to build more sites as well. So and that's not what we got, and so going back to the RFP discussion, that would level the playing field, and we could see the comparisons on two systems that are, how many ever systems are presented to us through an RFP process would kind of clear that up. It was very confusing, and then it is backwards.
It did offer or introduce a whole level of confusion.
Yeah, agreed.
Motorola had a request 2 years plus ago, along with all the other vendors. It was an RFI, I believe.
Yeah, before we were involved, yeah.
Respond to this set of rules, and they did. And that's what their presentation was about. And then another vendor came in with a different set of rules and did their presentation. So you're looking at apples and oranges.
Yeah, no, I think we got that.
We all know that.
There's more questions online there.
Yes, Griffin asks.
And I got you, Chief.
What is the estimated yearly cost to our taxpayers per 100,000 for all options?
Could you repeat the question again?
What is the estimated yearly cost to our taxpayers per $100,000 for all options?
And who's asking the question?
Griffin.
So we don't know yet. So in part of our conversation internally and with federal engineering, if we do an RFQ, an ITB, an RFP, whatever vehicle to get to a specification that needs to be met, it's more than just radios and radio sites. It is civil engineering, it is civil construction, it is backhaul, it is radio consoles, it's subscriber. There's just a trainload of things that you have to develop a estimated cost, a budgetary number. All of that, and then what we would do is get all those costs associated to those things. We would take it to Special Districts Association, which is what we belong to. They have a whole department that does nothing but financing for districts. They tell us, based on the budget number, what we can expect, whether we do a GEO bond or if we did a special option levy. We can have conversations about grants. We can talk about all the different funding models, including financing. There are government loan processes that we could leverage. Several vendors offer loans to pay for the system. So all of that is a question mark yet because we don't have that bottom number. What is the total? We have to get to that number first, and then we can figure out what the taxable rate is per thousand for a homeowner.
Any other online questions?
Nope.
So I think Chief Pritchard was first, and then.
So, a couple of thoughts, and then I'm going to get back to some questions specifically for federal engineering. You identified not too long ago that there were no standards. As our vendor, working for Columbia 911, why? You started out with this whole process giving us comparisons of apples, oranges, and onions. Why? We're back in the same boat we were when you were talking about owning our own 800 system, VHF system, or sharing an 800 system. And even with the sharing 800 system, it was all over the board. I got to tell you, I'm really frustrated. I'm also frustrated because I started out by asking you a question about negatives. Tell me the cons. I haven't heard one con from you yet. All I've heard is positives. I don't disagree that there are positives. Believe me, I know the positives. I am very appreciative that our chair, the sheriff, and Vernonia and other agencies have also shared that there are vast differences with these coverage maps. And I'm going to come back to that because I think moving forward today, that speaks volumes. With regards to our friend from WCN, I'm very concerned about joining with another agency. And let me give you an example. We talk about interoperability. There's a gentleman in the back that talks interoperability. That's really important for some of us. I don't want to speak up for Vernonia, but they do a lot of interoperability with Banks Fire, which is on the WCN system. We have to interface with Portland and Tualatin Valley because of the lack of cooperation with WACA, which shares technology components with everybody in this room. We had a situation where patient care was delayed almost an hour, maybe a little bit longer, because somebody refused to be a partner agency. So when I asked you, about guarantees with us having a seat at the table, we talk about technology changing, that is really important. And I want to make sure, I want to guarantee that happens moving forward if we were to work closely with our agency. Now, moving forward, if we were to join the WCN system, one of our interoperability problems would go away because the challenge that we have is WAC is not able to talk on the VHF radios. There's no link. And that was a big part of that. But there were workarounds that they were refusing to consider based on the great work that the Columbia County 911 staff was pitching for it on workarounds. They just were like, yep, we're not doing it. So that is a concern for us. I'm also concerned for us in this meeting because the premise of this meeting, based on what Mr. Russell was hoping to bring us together for, was to give direction to Columbia 911, because we need to move forward on this. And all I've heard today is there's no standards, and until we can come up with a standard of what the expectations are, what we want to see for coverage, do we need more towers? How can we make a decision on whether to go with this Motorola system or do an RFP? I mean, I'm all about the deal. And I think, everybody in this room is considerate of that. But if we're talking about how we would buy into this Motorola system, but have to add a couple towers to get the coverage that we need, I gotta look back at our federal engineering partner and say, why aren't you guiding us and saying, whoa guys, these are a set of standards that you need. Now maybe you didn't get that direction in the beginning, but look at all the people in this room. Our time is valuable. And where I sit today, I can't make a decision based on what my other colleagues are sharing. So I'm hoping you can answer a couple of these questions, but I would also like to throw out, maybe we need to come back when Columbia 911 says, here's the standards, does everybody agree to them? Okay, what do we need to do to get this standard? This is what the costs are. Because right now, the costs are going to be all over the board.
Sure. So first of all, we are not been part of the process aside from showing up in December. So we're not the ones who solicited basically proposals from Tate or Motorola. So that we haven't even been under contract with you guys for a few months at this point. We're doing this for just relationship purposes. So to that effect, as far as the process, again, I think I laid it out pretty clearly here. We would hopefully then be under contract and put together specifications that would be, as you refer to, the standards, to be able to then solicit actual proposals to be able to adhere to a system that meets the district's needs. So our professional opinion, again, is for obvious reasons to join a regional partner, because regardless, those specifications might be the exact same as they are for an RFP. The difference is the cost effectiveness. And I agree, I understand there's other aspects of it which I can't speak to, and Ron can, as far as the vote and all that. I know he's done a good job of speaking to that, but I'm talking about the upfront actual aspects of coverage, interoperability, sharing of the core, and so forth. We would write those specifications and put it together and make sure that the vendor adheres to it when we enter into a contract. So as far as why are there not, typically the standards don't get developed before we actually go out to solicitation. I was not involved, and we were not involved in the solicitation for Tate. To me, they're unsolicited proposals because I was not involved with Motorola or Tate to provide a thing, which again, I think if you take that out of the equation, basically we're following the process that was set forth by this board a while ago to kind of come to an agreement on which direction to take so we can go to those standards and put that solicitation together. As far as budget, I mean, we provided budgetary costs in the conceptual design. They're still in that ballpark. The exacts, as I completely agree with Mike, you're not going to know exact numbers until you go out to the solicitation. Things are changing so much with inflation. The more you delay of trying to get this number, that number is going to be outdated 6 months from now or a year from now. And no vendor, we've been dealing with vendors, they're not even agreeing to price points more than 3 months because their costs are rising as well. So there is a fact of, yes, ballpark numbers, sure, but the exact numbers you're not going to get until you get a proposal with them from any vendor. They'll give you probably a 90-day lock-in, and then you get to go through negotiations and you sign the deal. That's how the process works. you know, and it's become even more difficult over the last couple of years with the way supply chains and costs and so forth have risen. Whereas 3-4 years ago, I could probably give you a number and it would probably be still applicable a year from now. Now that's not possible due to the impacts of what's happening in the world.
Chief Medina.
Yes.
Which is a point that I've said all along, is that we need to make some kind of a decision. Okay, we need to make some kind of decision because we've been kicking this can down the road for so long.
100% agree.
And you know, and I mentioned this at the last meeting that we had. Until I have a radio in my hand, even if we were to decide something right now, you're looking at best case scenario 3 years.
Absolutely.
Probably.
And we got this economic downturn that is obviously coming. Okay, so those are all factors. But in all of that, in the presentations, listen, and with all due respect to the vendors, I get it. They want the business, so they're going to present it however it is in their best interest. And I understand. But to be honest with you, I don't care what's in the best interest of the vendors. I care what's in the best interest of public safety. Because in the cost projection they put up, for example, Motorola stated they were going to leverage all of the current Columbia 911 sites that we had and add 2 sites. Okay? Well, if you compare that to what Tay said, they were going to use 5 of the Columbia sites and build 9 more sites.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what's that going to cost? How's that going to work out? Because, I mean, I understand and I agree with Chief Pritchard. We haven't gotten everything. I understand, and I remember from the very beginning, Federal Engineering said that the standards don't come up until system design moves forward. When system design moves forward, then we'll know the standards. And I get all that, which is why I would say to the company board, we need to make a decision. But to those ends, I mean, there are so many holes. And again, if I was a CEO of either Motorola or Tate, I would applaud either one of those companies because they did exactly what they were going to do. They presented a pie in the sky, unicorns and rainbows. You know, I mean, you know, we hear that, and then from one turn I hear, oh, the radio's going to be $431 per radio. That doesn't seem accurate. It's not what I've heard before. You know, Motorola's going to give us radios. Tate, we got to buy our own. I mean, you know, I mean, it's like it would be like if I know you're offering oranges, I'm going to say, yeah, well, I'm going to peel the orange for you. I mean, but at the end of the day, certain costs are what the costs are.
Sure.
Right? So what I would beg the board is to not kick the can down the road anymore. Remember, we've got 3 years before we can hold a new radio system in my hand to give to my guys. And that's best case scenario. I made the statement and I heard crickets when I said, realistically, we're probably talking 5.
If you build your own, it will probably be closer to 5. If you join WCN, depending on the number of sites, it'll probably be closer to 3 because, again, established stuff. So yeah, anywhere 3 to 4, maybe 5 on the long side, but it's probably a 2.5-3 year minimum, rollout, especially for the coverage needs you have and so forth. And to your point, absolutely, Chief. I mean, my notes, again, from Tate, and I'm not trying to speak for them or anything, but I've taken notes as well, and all in with when you factor in the site improvements, the subscriber radios for the numbers you need. I mean, it's about a $25 million commitment for the Tate proposal. And Motorola has, again, had a lot of deficits. I can't even come with a number because their coverage was obviously woefully inadequate for what it is. And again, those are 2 things that are what I call unsolicited proposals, but I'm just reflecting it to what you're saying. I'm in 100% agreement with because by getting this information, I feel it just muddies the waters as opposed to just taking a direction and moving forward.
Absolutely, and that's what I want. That's what I specifically wanted to make sure that was communicated to the Columbia 911 board. And I get it, and I understand. Here's the deal. We have to do something, for the love of God. We have got to do something.
Agreed.
It's time.
I think I communicated that to you all at the very beginning of this meeting.
So
I guess my thought is, especially for advisory committee, is we just talked about how whether we buy Motorola or whether we buy Tate, right, those systems are interoperable. We're talking the same bandwidth of service, right? And what we got was 2 different maps that showed 2 different levels of coverage. And clearly, one of those has to be skewed. If we're talking 700-800 megahertz, stuff that works together that is interoperable, if one map can show us that it has this phenomenal coverage, then the other map has to be capable of providing the same coverage. It's the same stuff. It's not
Same
like we're
physics.
talking VHF
Right.
and 700-800 and 2 completely different bandwidths that don't work the same. So I feel like some of us are really stuck on this map problem, which we've talked about for at least 8 months, that we are not going to get that until we have a direction and a system chosen and we get to contracting to build a system. If you're talking 700-800 megahertz and one map looks really good and one map looks like crap, either somebody's lying or the one that looks like crap can be just as good as the one that's phenomenal.
Yeah,
We're
just
not
based on number of
talking
sites.
multiple systems here.
Right, correct.
I
It's
can see
physics is physics.
your frustration here. You want answers, but we haven't asked the questions yet. We've got to get the requirements and give them to somebody. Either release them to everyone or do an ITB to Motorola.
Yeah, so can
Here's all your
we
And if
talk
you do
about
an
that a little?
ITB to Motorola or
Okay.
direct to procurement, if you're not happy with it, then you can always go to RFP after. And again, I'm not trying to delay the process, Chief, but I understand that the fastest path, the most cost effective, is, in our opinion, that.
Directed. Okay,
Correct.
so that's my question.
Yeah.
So I think what you're hearing from the group is we would prefer an RFP process. Let's level the playing field. Let's get those standards, specifications ironed out.
Mike, I don't think that's accurate though.
No, that's not accurate, no.
Here's the thing, we sat in that presentation with Tate, and Tate threw a $6 million number on the presentation. And I had to unmute from my office and go, hey, based on some quick math, which I'm not a math whiz, my number's like $26 million, not 6. Tate's trying to sell us a radio that's not even on the market. It's not even out of testing. We don't even know if it's available.
Or if it's public safety certified and compliant.
As a fire agency, there is honestly one radio that I want to put on my people, and it has a big M on it because I know that it works. I know that it's tested. I know that it's on the network. I worked in Washington County. I was there when I remember back when we originally went to 896, 97, and having to manually switch channels to go to repeater channels because that's how we made it work in the hills. Right? I was there when we made the switch to phase 2 digital. And it works. The coverage in my fire district is far better today on WCN than it is on CCOM.
Because here's the
That's
deal.
just the facts.
And I agree with you, Chief, and we're not talking about Jose's radio freaking service. We're talking about Motorola here, okay? And what it seems to me is that Motorola did a presentation. Somehow Tate was aware of what Motorola's numbers were going to be, and they just undercut it. That's what it feels like. Because, I mean, there's just so many holes and so many things that's left out of one, which is what I was saying. The towers is misrepresented. The radio cost is misrepresented. I mean, and that's what you do when you're trying to get business. I applaud their business sense. But as a firefighter, you got to give me something that works, and we need to make a decision. And we have champagne taste. We have a beer budget. We already know there's incredible amount of savings that we're going to get with Motorola. We know it. It's there. Let's make a decision. Let's do something and get things done.
Chief.
Pardon me,
Okay,
Mr.
Chief.
Co-Chair.
Yes.
Let's go ahead and
Mr.
recognize our
Paterkin.
legal counsel.
First, I apologize for not being here on time. I'm usually a half hour early, and you know that if you're not a half hour early, you're late. I was a half hour early, I thought. So again, I apologize. I'm new to this, and so I'm not going to try to say that I know all the history, but I'm experienced in contract work, in construction, procurement. I have a suggestion as we have worked through this issue, and that may be a two-pronged approach. And Rajit, I'd like you to jump in here and supplement this, and as also Mr. Polakani. First of all, I think we need one path forward. that would be based on some premises that this district joins WCN. WCN takes, we negotiate with the C800 and have that equipment that's surplus given back to Motorola. Now, this is really an important component. Motorola has said that they would honor the pricing, the 2017 pricing plus the 40% discount. Now, the reason that we have not done any temporary agreement with C800 because we thought that there's a better solution. That solution is transferring that equipment back to Motorola. Motorola packages it up, and then we get the warranty, we get the complete system. Brigitte can help us do the specifications. So that's number 2, okay? So premise 1, WCN. Premise 2, get that equipment back to Motorola, package it up, and they present pricing, coverage, equipment, the entire criteria. And that's my job, that's Rajit's job, it is this board's job is to evaluate the contract particulars. It has to be complete, and it has to address the coverage needs. It has to address the issues that you guys have raised, compatibility, and so on and so forth. Now, once we have the Motorola proposal that's based, and then this whole, and we can write this up. There's 2 things that Motorola has offered, and Mike, I'd like you to address those because you've spoken to Motorola, and that is 1, short-term upgrades to the system, and also radios, because those are the 2 additional issues that this package, this way forward, is going to go. Now, before Mike addresses it, so that's option number 1, and we can address that. Federal Engineering, myself, partners, WCN, we can all put that together as a package and have a presentation and support that. If the advisory board and if this board chooses to take additional step, once we have that system or that proposal in place that's comprehensive and complete, you can always send out an RFP for competitive, because Tate is going to create a new system. They won't have the benefits of the equipment that C800 is offering. And so, as I have thought about this last night and listened, this is something that it seems to me workable, because if the Motorola WCN path forward is possible and it gives you safety, coverage, compatibility, the price savings are potentially millions of dollars because of this garage sale on the available equipment. It's a unique situation that supports perhaps a single source contract. However, if once that package is put together, there can be an RFP, and Harris and Tate could choose to make a competitive bid, and then we can all have another meeting to resolve it. So that's the path forward, at least I would like to see from a legal standpoint and a productivity and a timing, because this does need to get done. Rajit?
That's exactly, you put it much more eloquently than I could. So yeah, I agree with that. That's what I was just mentioning, is because to your exact points, you could take that path, make a decision on, is this the direction that the group wants to go? And if not, I mean, nothing's binding until you sign on the dotted line, right? So at that point, of course, it would be the most time-effective cost, we believe. But if the group doesn't feel that way at that time, the decision can be made, okay, we got this information, great, but we think, we can do better, whatever the case may be. More likely than not, that won't happen, but that option is there. Then you go through an RFP process, which is a longer process, but it does, to your point, allows other vendors to be able to respond and so forth. And that to me, that's a very feasible path.
And in your experience, single source procurement under those circumstances is certainly feasible and it's appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely. Given the exact set of circumstances that you clearly articulated, absolutely. We did something similar a few years ago in the city of El Paso, where they had existing equipment, and we did a directed procurement to that vendor as well, just because of the cost effectiveness of being able to leverage that. They had not built out the sites or anything, but they had the core and a lot of the equipment related to that, and that was a far faster process, just because we were able to leverage that. And fortunately, and in this case too, that vendor, and in this case it will be Motorola, would be aware that should there, to your point, yes, C800 and so forth, but the overall package has to be in line with the costs and so forth. And if they are somehow trying to do some major markups, they are aware that, hey, we would go to RFP because you're not the only game in town. And that fear alone I've seen has worked in the past. And if it doesn't, again, we have the option to go to RFP.
Chief Pritchard.
So, Mr. Chair, I appreciate what Council just shared. There's a lot of value to what you said, and my colleague from Columbia River made a very valid point we kind of put forward. What are the decisions that we need? What is the decision today that needs to be passed on to the 911 board? Are we just supposed to guide them with saying, WACA, we own our own system, or CRESA, or am I missing something? And then the second thing is, for the record, nobody said anything about negatives yet.
Mr. Chair, can I just step on that for just a second? Jeff, you're right. And the thing that, from Henry's perspective, and Henry's perspective only, is I've been looking for that same exact answer for 5 years. What is it exactly? Now, keep in mind, in the last year, we've dropped VHF out of the question. So in 4 years, it took us that long to truly pull that off of the table. So now we're to where we are here today. And the bad thing about being around a long time is you remember stuff that was said 20 years ago. And 20 years ago, this board, the 911 board, was told 800 does not work, nor will it ever work in Columbia County. That's why we had a VHF system then. Times change, equipment changes, technology changes, all of that stuff. But I keep asking the same question that Chief Medina talked about at the very, very beginning of this. What's behind the curtain? What don't we know? What are the downfalls? The one downfall that I see that this board would have to take on as a liability or potential liability is we build this thing out, we get federal engineering, we get all the pros that really know what they're doing to build this thing out, and we flip the switch on, and one of y'all calls up and says, we can't talk on Highway 47 in mist. and we can't fix it, we can't adjust it, we can't make it work, and then this board, has to drop another $1 million to put a tower someplace to fix that problem. Those are things behind the curtain that we also don't know from the fiscal responsibility of this board, because some of it is truly an unknown. And I don't know how we get all of the negatives, Jeff. I know there's going to be some. You know there's going to be some. We all know there's going to be things unforeseen no matter how good we plan this thing. I'm not sure how we get there, because that also is what we've been spinning our tires on for all of these years, is the fear of the unknowns to a large degree.
Mr. Heimula, real quick, I appreciate what you're saying. I don't disagree with that. But at no point has anybody said one negative about potentially going with Cresa. Don't you find that odd?
I find a lot of it odd. Absolutely, yes.
So then, what are we supposed to do to our taxpayers and the communities when we do have an it comes back to the record, we say, hey, we're asking these questions, we didn't get anything.
Chief Medina.
Okay, we're all a little naive and foolish if we think that no matter what we decide, we're not going to get an OO. Seriously. I mean, that's ridiculous to think that no matter what we decide, we're going to have hiccups and challenges. We're talking about radio communication here. It isn't like I'm running 2 cans at a string and I can see it. Now, the issue I think that I'm going to beseech the board is that we've got 2 factors. Henry, I agree with everything that you're saying, and I value, I speak to Chief Pritchard a lot because the organizational knowledge that exists is key to us making a good decision. We got 2 things that are going to kill us right now, and I see it coming. Remember, I come from a major metropolitan area. There's 2 things that are killing us right now. The first one, we have no control over. It's time. No control over that. The second one is money. And I'm looking at the discounts and the equipment and I get it. You could give me a $5 million house for free right now, and I wouldn't be able to afford the taxes. I wouldn't be able to keep it. And again, let's remember, we're talking about Motorola. We're not talking about some fly-by-night company.
Well, I think Chief Medina, you hit a really good point there, is that we're talking about all the potential hiccups in building this new system. Let's not forget the amount of hiccups we have in our current system. We have terrible radio coverage in Scappoose, for God's sake. The other day on Scapburn, I couldn't talk on TAC 3 on a mobile.
So I'd like to address that because.
But my point is, we got all these hiccups that we're already having, and we're stuck on the potential hiccups from getting something brand new. We have to stop forgetting that what we have now is falling apart.
And the potential hiccups, I mean, we've seen a lot of implementations, and yes, there's, and because we've seen so many, we try to avoid the pitfalls, but there's always going to be some hiccup here and there. But to your point, Chief, or Board Supervisor, is that those things like, the coverage is not going to work here, and we can't have that with the first responder. Absolutely you can. But the good news is when the vendor builds out the system, there's coverage acceptance testing. You do not need to sign on the dotted line to accept a system until all the requirements. When we put a thing together, there's also something called a compliance matrix. And the compliance matrix has all the requirements, capacity, coverage, all these aspects. And when they sign up the vendor signs up for them and say, yes, I comply, that then will become part of the legal contractual package that goes into the contract. They're going to build out the system. Yes, we'll have a hiccup with some site taking longer, and there's going to be things that happen from that perspective. But the hiccups of the system not performing as was required and expected, that is a no-go. That means that system is never getting signed off until the vendor corrects those deficiencies. And to the point is that system will be better than the system you have today in every aspect. That's what we've heard from the stakeholders. That will be what's in the system requirements, whether it be coverage requirements, capacity requirements, interoperability. So I just want to make sure that I can't predict what's going to happen during the deployment, But I can say that we have never had a client accept a system that has not met all the needs that were listed and complied to by the vendor.
We just need to make sure that list is good to start with.
Yes, that's the key, and we have lots of years of experience, and we are continually evolving that. Not only taking your requirements, but we know some of the where vendors take certain shortcuts, but we make sure that those types of requirements are solidified. And of course, everyone here has the opportunity to review it before it goes out to the vendor. So I want to make sure that this is not just FE going off in our corner. I mean, yes, we have the expertise, we have the knowledge, but we want to make sure that the stakeholders have the buy-in to say, yes, this is exactly what we need, and this is what we want the vendor to propose.
And Rajiv, if I could, and then, excuse me, Mike. Look, it's our job to make sure that the contract and the specifications meet the needs of the owner, which is the board right here. And that means compliance and warranty. It means performance and warranty. Whether it's a building in downtown Portland on specifications, and or whether it's the old Oregon Iron building ships for the Navy. It's all about contracts, performance, specifications, warranties, and if you have a good company, because the warranties and the contract is only as good as the company, the contractor, or in this case, Motorola. And we all agree that Motorola is a good company. I think Tate's a good company from everything I've heard. And I'm not saying that they're not. We're just looking at this going forward. And so, you asked the question, what should the advisory committee advise, make a suggestion to the board? Well, if you want to get this moving forward from a timing standpoint, suggest to the board to pass a resolution to have a proposal put together that encompasses just as I mentioned earlier, the WCN, the C800 equipment issue, and to get Motorola locked down into the specifications, including what they're giving, coverage, price, so on and so forth. And then I was going to have Mike talk about this interim. There's some real potential for interim solutions or system upgrades. Mike, would you address that so they know?
So I'm going to go backwards just a little bit because we were talking about us spinning our tires for literally years, and was directly related to the bands. There was a whole conversation amongst this group about VHF versus 7-800 versus hybrid, blah, blah, blah. No vendor in the past, no vendor today will guarantee coverage in VHF. So that was the experience years ago. That would be our reality today if we say we want a VHF system. Even in the hybrid system that we've talked about, regardless of who the vendor is, if we're talking about a hybrid, the vendor's not going to guarantee the coverage or performance of the VHF system, at least that portion of it. Tate, Motorola will guarantee performance and coverage based on the design that we all agree upon. There are the experts. I'm not, the board is not, and so we'd be relying on them to develop the specification. Me forward thinking, this body needs a voice at the table when we develop those specifications and expectations. So I'm already trying to formulate how to do that because a committee of 30 is like herding cats. But I'm formulating an idea of how to form a work group, a separate subcommittee of the advisory committee to help me, help federal to develop the specs and requirements that you guys need. So, there's that.
Mr. Anderson.
I just want to mention, when I hear stuff about coverage and talking about what it could be, what it wouldn't be, and doing the spec, is Mike hit it and you hit it too, is the reason VHF went out the window is because we could not get a performance bid spec that the vendor would stand behind and guarantee for coverage. So we went to the 800, 900, 700 spectrum area looking at it, because each vendor says, we will produce a map, we will give you the cost for that, and if it does not meet that, then the vendor on their dime will make it work. And so when I hear some discussion here about saying, well, what if we find there's a hole here, what are we going to do? Well, that's part of the acceptance testing, that it's going to be on the responsibility of the vendor to fix that hole.
Correct. That is correct.
What are the risks of going to WCN?
The risks?
Yeah.
So, kind of getting to the negatives, I guess.
Yeah.
So, and we've outlined this in the report, because we did have pros and cons for each aspect. And really, the biggest risk or con is you don't have full control, right?
Right.
That's truly the one, because we have so many clients across the country, and we have this conversation very often. And it's really, there's no one silver bullet. If there was, everyone would be doing it. So all the benefits that we've talked about, and I kept hearing, we haven't heard the negatives. Well, the benefits for one is kind of the negative for the other. So we can kind of talk about both scenarios. But the real negative on joining a regional system is really you don't have the 100% control. So that's really the biggest risk for the Columbia County. On the other side, all the benefits of WCN are now cons of doing your own. You're going to have additional sites because you don't have any coverage footprint. You're going to have additional maintenance costs because you don't have the economies of scale. You're going to have to buy cores because you don't have a core to leverage. You're going to have, if you so choose to have those interconnections to other systems, ISSI, that's another additional cost. So all the benefits of one become the negatives of the other, and that's really how these kind of work out. If there was one that was just everything was a pro and nothing was a con, we would tell you that, but that's the reality.
I'd be suspicious.
Yeah, you'd be suspicious. Yeah,
I would challenge the people to be specific. When you say lack of control, what does that really mean to you? What is it the fear of control look like?
For me, it's upgrading. So I hear this tossed around that WCN or WACA are 10 years ahead of Columbia County and where we're at, and so we would be 10 years behind. So they want to upgrade their core, and suddenly it knocks our ability to talk off. That's the fear.
So two things to that. One is you'll obviously have the latest and greatest equipment installed, and then the other thing is that what we talked about earlier, the software update, the system update. Those are core and other features that even things like switches and routers, they get updated on a biannual or maybe every 3 years, whenever. So those every 2 years. Thank you, sir. Every 2 year basis. So again, not to say you're getting a full forklift. We know the repeater is going to be in place. They'll get firmware upgrades and so forth. But keep in mind, and I know this fear because we've dealt with so many clients that have joined regional systems, and they all have common concern. Keep in mind, and I think Ron spoke to this clearly, it's in everyone's interest to, just whatever financial stuff you have in the fear in the back of your head, every government agency that's part of that system has the same fear. So typically, and you can speak to maybe how it works, but whatever that maintenance cost model and so forth, it's putting funds into different buckets or whatever, whether it's the system upgrade assurance or this and that, but there shouldn't be any massive forklift because we're already P25 phase 2. That's the latest and greatest. There's no phase 3 right now anywhere on the horizon. If there is, the vendors are smart enough to try and leverage their existing installed base, because trying to go to any client as a vendor, and I think you were talking about dollars and cents, and say, oh, you spent $20 million 5 years ago, now you got to spend another $20 million to go to the latest and greatest. That's not going to fly. So there's business reasons also where you feel, okay, there's not going to be a forklift. Now, what's the typical life of the system? It's not 25 years anymore, I'll be honest with you. 100% system, if you get 15 years out of it, great. And what is that next system going to look like? I don't know. Writing is not on the wall yet as to what that's going to look like. But at least for this type of money to say, okay, I can get 15 years when it's built and turned online out of it, I mean, that I at least can say that's a valid forecast.
The other concern is going to a subscriber model. So costs that my department's not incurring now, we would start incurring. So that's another concern, is that we go with WCN and suddenly now we're being charged for each radio per month, and that's a budget item that gets added.
And that's valid, but then the offset to that is, and again, I don't have the dollars to compare, but they're a valid point, but that those dollars are going for something. It's not, WCN is not a for-profit entity. That money is going to build out, improve the system, is going to actual maintenance and other aspects of the system. I'm sure Ron can speak to more, but that's again, I'm not going to compare exact dollars and cents, but to the point I was trying to make earlier, in general, when you have one entity owning just their own system, those costs are going to be higher because you're now not having that economies of scale of sharing those costs over a larger platform. So that's typically a true statement. So even though you'd have these subscriber costs, which I agree, it's another budget item you have to budget for, and it's on an ongoing basis. The offset is if you build your own system, you're going to have some costs as well, and probably going to be higher. So either way, it's going to be a model that, yes, these systems, unfortunately, the newer systems do have more of these costs associated with just maintenance and upgrades and so forth, because they're much more computer based as opposed to the existing systems that are in place.
And you don't have the infrastructure to support yourself right now, right? You go to somebody else. In my board.
Can I make a process suggestion?
Sure.
I don't know if you know who I am, but I've got some experience in just public process and stuff. Actually, I used to be on the board of directors for 911 with Henry. We got a whole big, huge check the first time we upgraded back over 20 years ago. It was a great experience. But just looking from the outside in, and this isn't any input on the radio stuff at all. This is just processing. You could take it or leave it. If 435 House members could vote 15 times and elect a speaker, okay, 30 members could come to some sort of a conclusion. It might take a few votes. But what I would suggest is one of the advisory members make a motion, get a second, see if it sticks, discuss that motion, and move forward.
Yeah, I
Otherwise, you
appreciate
guys are gonna be talking
the
about
advice.
same thing all
Yeah,
day.
I appreciate the advice. I want to get there too. I think it's important that each member though have an opportunity to ask their questions.
But
And
you
so
could
I
do
want
that
to
during
get through
discussion
everybody's
of the
questions,
motion.
and then we can go to,
But that'll
I
help
think
me.
we're getting there, so I appreciate your patience.
Yeah, that'll get
Chief Medina.
Okay, I mean, and I understand, Chairman, what you're trying to let everybody voice. But what I don't want to happen is exactly what Commissioner Highsmith just said, that we're gonna spend another 20 years deciding on what we're gonna do.
Yeah. Nobody's interested in that,
okay,
Chief.
So here's what I'm saying. On behalf of Columbia River, that covers St. Helens, Columbia City, Prescott, and Rainier, I would ask my public safety partners to advise our advisory committee to move forward and give the recommendation to the Columbia 911 board to make a resolution as was stated right here, the safeguards that Mr. I took my glasses off, has said is gonna protect us, and like we've already said, it doesn't hurt us anything until we put our name on the line. So we can spend another 20 years saying what ifs and what ifs and what ifs. Or exactly what the mayor of Rainier just said, we could just, as an advisory committee, tell Columbia 911, let's go. Then we talk about that one motion, if we have anything else to talk about, and we move on. I'll tell you that if I'm saying that I can't have my people go 3-4 years without good communications. A lone officer has to be panicking right now. I would. So, again, I would ask my public safety colleagues that that's what we should do. Go, go, go.
Deputy Chief Davis was next.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion on behalf of the advisory committee, and that is that we advise the Columbia County 911 Board of Directors here that we sole source the Motorola solution and join the WCN network.
I second that motion.
It's been moved and seconded to sole source to Motorola and join the WCN network. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, question.
Chief.
And I guess this is for the group. Would it be more appropriate in calling the question to just leave it with going with the WACA system and let the 911 district and the subcommittee vet out what a standard is, which platform to go with, so at least they can get marching orders to move forward?
I don't think so, because I think we have to get, if we don't make a move soon with C800, we're going to lose that equipment, and we're going to lose the discounts that we're seeing. We know what the benefit is of purchasing that equipment at the current buying power, 2017 prices and a 40% discount. We know that the equipment that they're offering can be split up farther than it currently is, so we're actually getting more equipment in theory, more operational capability out of what we're purchasing than what we need. And so I think if we're not specific in this motion and driving that direction back to the board of directors, we're like kind of half kicking the can at that point, instead of going all in and saying this is the direction we have to go and we have to move.
I agree with my colleague, my esteemed colleague there from Vernonia. I think that this is the way that we need to do. I believe that there's enough safeguards and it doesn't really tie our hands in anything, but at least we're demonstrating not only to the constituents, but to our members of our organizations that we are moving in a direction, that we are gonna tackle this, that we're not gonna spend 20 years to try to make a decision. I mean, like again, we could what if this forever. I say we vote, and then we make a decision because that's what we get paid to do. And then we go to Columbia 911 and then just see what happens. Rather than I mean, I'm starting to feel like we're the UN. Like we say wait until we say wait again. I mean, we.
So it's my observation that the conversation today has been dominated by the fire service, and I have not heard, except for Sheriff Pixley, anything from public safety. So if there's anybody from public safety that would like to say something, now's the time.
All right, I would like to.
Lieutenant.
Yes,
please.
yes, Columbia County. It's great to be here, guys. All right, so I am new to the area. Obviously, I do not know the particular 100 synthologist that we have. But just a little bit about me. One thing I learned in my past 10 years law enforcement and being deployed overseas to Iraq, my most piece of equipment here is my radio, 100%. And as any good public servant, as a police officer, try to do my research. And just looking at things at face value here, to me it looks like the TIG will offer the best coverage for our officers. This is just me coming from outside in. So that's my biggest thing. And one thing I can see as well is too, I know for a fact that there's going to be costs that no matter what system you go to, there's still going to be costs coming there. As a business owner, I learned that. You just take my wife out to dinner, like all is more expensive. And then secondly, what it comes down to as well, just really understanding that whoever we go with, they need to be held accountable going forward when it comes down to it. So just from my perspective, and just looking at the coverage and basic information that I've seen, it looked like Tate will have the better coverage for our officers. Because when it comes down to it, if you're in a DV situation or overseas in Iraq, you don't care who the provider is. Once you got that coverage, reach help when it comes back to it. So that's my 2 cents. I'm glad to be here, guys, and we'll leave it at that.
You know, I appreciate the statement that the lieutenant just made, but as my colleague from Vernonia said, 800 coverage is 800 coverage. We're gonna get the coverage that we're gonna get because we're gonna verify that in the contract that the coverage has to be what the coverage has to be.
Agreed.
So the thing is that this is the question that I have as an advisory board member.
Actually, we have a question online first.
Okay, but that's it.
Yeah.
Are we gonna kick the can down the road or are we finally gonna make a decision?
I don't mean to shut you down. I'll get back to you. We just have something online.
Go ahead, Greenway.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
So Mike, to your point, some little background, everybody's given it. I have over 36 years law enforcement experience, and just like Chief Medina, I came from a major metropolitan city of 2.2 million people. Prior to that, I worked in a smaller agency in Illinois. We have reached paralyzation through overanalyzation, and we need a sense of urgency to move this project forward. I will tell you that I am partial to Motorola and the St. Helens Police Department. My 36 years of vast law enforcement experience, the majority of police agencies across the United States use Motorola for a reason. If you could Google and look back at Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, where I served honorably for 25 years, and I was the incident commander on our nation's worst active shooter incident, we had Motorola. That one time, the city of Las Vegas went to a different radio system. It was called Desert Sky, and it failed miserably, putting officers' lives in danger on a daily basis, to the point where we had to go back to Motorola. So the St. Helens Police Department votes with Chief Medina, move this project forward, make a decision, and we support the Motorola Radio Company because they have been proven in our profession time after time to be reliable. And that's all I'll say about that. And thank you, Chief Medina, for your candor and your moving this forward, because it's painful that we have so many resources in our county sitting in these meetings time after time. And again, we overanalyze and we paralyze. We're afraid to make the decision. No matter what radio system you go to, no matter what database you go to, you're gonna incur problems and you just work through them. But the St. Helens Police Department, because our current radio system has adjusted our training and policy, which is impacting our residents. We now have to have 2 officers on a call that to ensure that in case we have radio failure, they have immediate backup. And then what that does is that delays the response to our citizens of St. Helens, and they shouldn't have to put up with that type of service. So thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Chief. So we have a motion on the table, still, just to remind everybody, sole source to Motorola, join WCN. Chief Medina.
So, that's it. I mean, we're here now. This is the gut check moment. This is a moment when leaders make decisions. I'm gonna say, go, 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 go.
Nathan?
Go ahead, Pixley.
How long, if we go with Motorola, how long is it gonna take them to stand the system up and get operational?
It really depends on the number of sites, but I think what we've talked about here, 2 to 3 years, is probably, I mean, in my opinion, probably reasonable. A lot of the work is going to be on just the site piece of it, because obviously you have to deliver the coverage. The actual joining the WCN part is the easy part, right? I mean, there's some work there. I don't want to minimize that, fleet maps and so forth, but really it's on that piece. So yeah, I would say probably 2 to 3 years.
Can I jump in here for just a
Yes,
second?
yes, sir.
And we're going to leverage Ron. We go back to the December 1st meeting. Chief Medina made a strong statement at the end of that meeting about our current system and keeping it alive and functional during whatever construction project we're going with any vendor. But that got me thinking, what could we do? And it changes how to keep our current system up, depending on the path that this body takes. If the motion is sitting on the table here for Motorola and WCN, there's a potential solution to at least help us with a crutch in the interim. So I've had conversations with Ron, with Motorola. If we look at those 3 surplus sites that C800 is offering to us, we did get confirmation that that 3rd site can be ours. That was still in the air for quite a while, but they've made the final decision. We can have it if we want it. If we go back to what Motorola shared with us, those 3 sites were designed for a much larger system capacity-wise. So for us, we can take 1 site and it splits into 2. So 3 sites turn into 6. Okay. Can we take one of those sites and stand it up here at Columbia 911? Well, sure, it can be done. We have construction taking place as we speak at our Meisner site. Could we take one and stand it up there? Sure, we can do that. fairly quick, and everything's relative, but can we take those 2 sites, tie them to the current WCN system? We know that there's coverage in the Vernonia area. It bleeds over into the Miss Birkenfeld area. We know from Scappoose Fire's experience, it really does flow Highway 30 all the way up to about really where we are today in this building. But if we stood up the site here, stood up Meisner, can we tie to the WCN system to help bring us up? There's a whole conversation about subscriber radios. We're working through that conversation, how to get some radios tied to our current system, tied to the WCN system. This is all very high level and interim right now, but those conversations are taking place to help stand up. And I'm going to turn to Ron.
So we've got, in addition to the 3 sites that are part of the last element of construction, we have 2 what are called ASRs. They're a standalone trunk repeater site. Those were demonstration sites that we put in place to allow folks to understand the transition to digital, how it sounds, how it behaves. Those are in addition or separate to the 3 sites are being offered for sale and use. Those sites very minimally would need to be upgraded, then added to the system. It's a very simple connection because they are standalone systems. They're not voted. And they're not way more, but more capacity than would necessarily be needed, but could be put in to provide coverage into some specific areas. Whether those areas are the most appropriate, we were just talking about one here, one at Meisner. That would allow for a transition. It's important to recognize the most flexible element of your system, though, is going to be the radios and how you structure those radios and how you specify them. So, given your particular, and this is probably not the best informed understanding of your operational requirements, but you've got a lot of folks that are still on VHF that you interact with, whether it's a state, whether it's an adjacent county, but you have that need. Plus, if you're going to make a slow transition, you're going to need VHF capability anyway in the radios you deploy. So looking at that, I think you want to take a 2-pronged approach. First, see what kind of coverage you get from those 2 sites and see if that's an adequate way to make a transition, in addition to the coverage that's already provided by WCN. So it's going to leave gaps. It's just, would it be enough to take that and then leverage your remaining VHF resources to fill those holes, knowing full well that you would have to potentially have to change your band and your channel in order to interoperate with one another. So that's important to recognize. Tying the 2 systems together could be done at your dispatch center. So in other words, if you picked 11 talk groups, channels in the trunked environment, just another way to say that, and I'm picking that, I don't know what the right number would be, you would have to decide which ones you would want to tie to the remaining VHF resources, so that when someone was on the trunked 800 system, they're also simultaneously working on the VHF channel or channels that would be assigned to that. That way you wouldn't have to be thinking too much about dialing around a lot. You would just have those tied together. If you're on the 800 side, you know where your VHF channel would be that would be on that same, if you will, talk group or channel. So it would be easy to make that transition, and I say easy from the standpoint of equipment availability and technologically. But there are some elements, going back to your, what are the negatives? The infrastructure isn't there to tie everything together right now. So there's costs and time associated with putting the infrastructure in. Infrastructure would be some sort of backhaul. Yeah, you had a hand up, sorry.
So we're still in discussion on the motion. Would like to move towards a vote, but Chief Pritchard.
So a couple of quick questions. One, when just want to make sure with the motion that's on the floor, when there is a yes vote, will there be work on the back end to determine what that level of coverage is going to be? I just want to make sure that's clear, because if we say we're just buying Motorola equipment, you know, one of the things that is important for us is that coverage. So I just want to make sure that for the record, if we move forward with this Motorola equipment, we're still going to say, hey, you know what, we're probably going to need to add a couple of towers.
And it's important also for you to know, it's important to us. It's actually just as important to us, because not only will we as a district want to provide good service to you and the people that call for help, we don't want to hear any complaints. We just as soon be patted on the back and say, hey, you did a great job, this is working great. So I would say that this board is going to be following that line of thinking hardcore, because we want to do it right once. That's all.
That's why I was asking the question. I just want to make sure it was clear.
Absolutely. So I'll just jump on that. Should this vote take place, giving us direction, a lot of work starts, but it's earnest and it's pointed. And so we would work with legal counsel, federal engineering to develop, and you as the users, to develop those standards and specs. What that does, the initial vote is making a commitment. Listen, we're not signing a contract with Motorola or anybody. We're developing a pointed, vendor-specific solution to develop based on performance standards and all the stuff that goes with it, so we can come back to the board and you with budget numbers. That's given us the green light to push ahead.
And then my second and last question, and I think I'll have enough information at this point. I unfortunately was not able to make the last meeting, but it's my understanding that the system that was proposed is a hybrid system, or is it all 800?
So, again, that's part of our conversation with Motorola. So I did hear something different from after the December 1st meeting. And the question is, and it's a valid question, what's the point of staying on doing a hybrid versus just making it all 7-800? That's a question that we're going to go back to Motorola. They're prepared for that, to answer that question. So there's first thing. That means, is there additional cost to switch those two sites that were identified as being VHF to 7-800? Yeah, there's a different cost. What is the delta between VHF versus a new VHF for those sites versus 800? There is a difference, but I don't have that number today. However, all that being said, there is advantages to still a VHF layer within our system. The primary would be all 7-800, but there's legitimate reasons to keep a VHF layer for capacity, for mutual aid, obviously. But if there is a big event out here, it gives us capacity to patch additional interop between others coming into the county. So there's a whole method to the madness there.
That was a lesson that we learned on the Clackamas side primarily, but also on both sides when we had the fires. The national interoperable resources which are available tend to be replicated a little bit too much perhaps because they're not regulated. And so those resources get consumed very quickly. Licensed, and particularly VHF, licensed frequencies have a benefit that if state fire comes in, or the federal resources, whatever come in, ordinarily they're bringing a cache of radios that are wildland based cache, and that's normally going to be a VHF. If you have a conventional VHF overlay, and it's licensed, in other words, there's not going to be somebody else using it in that kind of environment, then you have the ability to patch in those federal or state resources that could come in with those caches and patch them into your trunk system and have that ability to deal with it. Whether that's lesser of an impact to law enforcement, but because typically law enforcement comes in multi-band radios, but fire brings in large VHF caches when they bring in a large configuration from around the nation. So I think from our perspective, systemically, we are in the process of finishing up that VHF element after the lessons that were learned through the last fire and basically the landslides and everything else that ensued after that, where you're bringing in additional resources, that is a fairly important thing to think through and make sure that, I mean, you don't need ubiquitous coverage. It's going to be in your wildland areas mostly that you care about, but at least I would recommend you consider that in your design as you're putting that together.
And that's an asset that we own. So we're not reinventing the wheel. We already have the frequencies, we have the sites. What would it take to just refresh the hardware to keep it usable for another layer on the 7800 I have another question for Rajit and or Ron or Mike. The question of joining any regional system, is the WCN system unique and unusual? Are there other examples, either locally, regionally, nationally, that accomplish the same things? This WAC is not, and the WCN system is not unique in that sense.
No, it isn't. Lane County, the 7 counties, LRIG.
Southwest 7 LRIG.
Yeah, it's not uncommon.
Frontier, which is a central off of Highway 84 South, 97 Frontier System, 3 county. Umatilla, Morrow.
Umatilla and Morrow is a joint
system. Frontier is a joint 3 county system.
ECSO.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Looks like Nathan has a.
Nathan.
How are we making a decision when we spent close to 2 hours saying we still don't have all the needed information? What is the total cost for Motorola? From Stephen.
That'll depend on the design.
Yeah, we've been saying that from the beginning, that we cannot determine the specifics until we go into a design process.
Correct.
And again, I'd like to emphasize that Rajit and I have to get this done. He's the expert on specifications. If we negotiate and get this package put together and we present it and it doesn't have the coverage or the specifications, then it's a no-go. But until we get that process done,
we won't have a dollar amount.
right, so we are going to have coverage and processes and equipment and price. That's our job. And that's what we want to go do to get this moving forward.
So again, to clarify, Mr. Peter King, I got it, Peter King. We are not encumbered or tied to anything. We're just making a decision to move forward.
And give us, yes, because you're making a recommendation to the board will then pass a resolution to say, team, go get this done, put together this burden of proof on how this is gonna work with WCN, with the Motorola, with everything that will work for the ultimate providers, because in the end, as all of you always say, it's about safety. And until we get to that point, we won't accept the contract. And so this is merely the first step, and we've got to get this done. Because until this board passes a resolution, then we're at a standstill. We don't want to be at a standstill. We want to get this process done. And in the end, if the whole Motorola WCN concept doesn't work, we'll tell you. Or you
So
can vote against it.
I guess that's where, we're not voting on cost. We're not, we have to separate the cost right now.
We're giving direction.
And so, in our experience and what we've seen, Tate looks less expensive than Motorola, so that's why committing to a more expensive option is hard for some people. I just making a general comment.
Yeah. There's a lot of holes in the Tate.
So we have to separate the cost right now. We're not talking about cost yet. Chief.
This is probably a question for Mike, but what is a realistic timetable for us to get all this back for, to know? Are we talking 6 months, a year? What are we talking about for them to design this?
You must be reading my mind, because I was actually going to ask, what's realistic, Rajit? for legal, me, you,
Yeah,
start
so
the process.
and it obviously takes time for the vendor side. So let's say things move forward. I'll put a scope of work together for you. That'll take a couple of weeks to get through. Then hopefully by the end of the month we can get started. Let's say February 1st that we get started as a team. To do a proper job and get inputs and so forth. I mean, we have a lot to go on because we have history with Columbia. So maybe takes about 6 weeks to 8 weeks to really get a comprehensive product put together. Then we have to release it to the vendor. For them to do a good job, I think 60 days is probably warranted. And then it comes down to the fine tuning, the negotiation. That can take, probably at least another couple of. So 6 months seems like a reasonable. I don't think it should. If it takes a year, we have a lot of stumbling blocks along the way, in my opinion. 6 months, 7, something in that neighborhood to get to a decision point where you're like, are we signing this thing or not? And this is, they'll have all the coverage maps and all the pieces of the puzzle, so to speak, should be for you to make an informed decision. I would think that would be let's say we'd probably be somewhere in the late summer time frame. I think at that point, maybe September at the most.
This isn't our first rodeo. We've
Yeah.
been in business for 40 years. We've done over 2,000 projects, close to 2,500, and they've all been successful. So we've been through this before.
Yeah, we won't let our clients sign on the dotted line if we're not. This is our reputation on the line as well, right? So you have many different factors here. I think what was mentioned here, like you won't want to build a system that you guys are not happy with. 100% agree. If it's not better than your old system, it's a failure. So that's a true statement, and yeah. So we'll do our due diligence on our end. I know the whole group here will do their due diligence when all the information is brought forth to them. And then hopefully if things are the way it seems, then that build implementation timeline we talked about will start sometime this fall and move forward. So and maybe maybe things are better from a supply chain model. All kinds of things can happen in the next few months as we're going through this process. So again, I'm cautiously optimistic.
Any other discussion before we vote? Thank you all. Appreciate that. So let's go to a vote. I'd like to count votes. I don't necessarily need to know who votes what. I don't want to do a roll call, but I do want to count votes. So raise of hands in the room, and if we can raise hands in the on the online as well, so we can just at least count hands. So all those in favor of the motion to sole source to Motorola, join WCN, raise your hand. All those in favor. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Online?
Nothing yet.
None.
You can count +1.
+1, 9. 9, 4. All those against, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4.
You just have one, Nathan?
2 now.
5.
3 now.
6. 'Any abstentions? Raise your hand. Nobody abstaining?
Nope.
Motion passes 9-6. So board, that would be our recommendation to you from the advisory committee.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. With that, I'll go ahead and ask for board discussion here from the 911 board. We've heard a lot of information here today. I would say it's a lot of sausage making that goes into this. We've spent a lot of time on this. Maybe we have overanalyzed. Maybe we've done it just the right amount. Maybe we've done all of this certainly we've done it for all the right reasons, but you know, I feel like none of us, whether we're a user agency or the board here, has had all of the information. And I don't think we have it all here today yet, but we certainly have a recommendation that heads us down a path of getting much more of those boxes filled in, I think. But anyway, board, is there a desired motion, or do you want to discuss this before we go to a motion? Your choice.
We'll follow procedure. I would ask Mr. Peter can repeat his recommendation on how we move forward, because he's going to be able to articulate it much better than me at this point. That'll end up being a motion.
Okay.
The motion is first that Columbia 911 would join WCN. Number two, that the district would negotiate a transfer of the available equipment of C800 to Motorola. Number three, that the district enter into negotiations with Motorola, and as a premise that the C800 equipment is purchased at 2017 prices with a 40% discount, and that the contract proposal would include all equipment, service, price, number of radios, coverage, towers, and all other elements that federal engineering would include. Number four, that there would be negotiations of short-term upgrades to better the current system using the equipment that is now available from C800. And number five, to negotiate the possibilities of Motorola hand radios to supplement the current system again during the interim.
Do we want to formalize our relationship with federal engineering at this time? It seems like that's been kind of a time and materials thing now. Have we received anything like that? I mean, we definitely, we need that aspect as well.
In our original agreement with federal, we broke it down into 3 phases, and so what federal is prepared to do is, and the district is prepared to do, is move into phase 2, which is to act as our agent for design, assist with design, and procurement. So Rajit and I will work on a statement of work and then a following cost that we will come back to the board in February. We should have that by February.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll formalize that at our regular meeting next time.
Correct.
Okay, all right. And I'm assuming, Mr. Peterkin, that you want all of those as separate motions? I mean, is
No,
that
can-
we
no,
put
we
that
can-
whole package together? We've talked about this
Right.
whole thing as a big package,
I-
so I don't know that we've left out any of what the expectations are.
It is the resolution would be to follow up on the quote Motorola WCN package as I have stated, and that the board would instruct staff, legal, and federal engineering to pursue that and then report to the board once they have completed the work and they can make a proposal to the board, and then the board can resolve it, review it with the advisory committee, and we hope to get a unanimous recommendation.
Why are you looking at me?
I don't know.
Because you're the new guy.
Because you're a lieutenant, what can I tell you? That's the idea.
Rob, does that meet the intent of your proposed motion?
My motion is to, as stated, items 1 through 5 from Mr. Peterkin.
Okay.
And
Is
we'll
there-
just say it, the Motorola WCN option.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, it has been moved and seconded, and I'm not gonna go through that 15 minutes again, but we're talking about the Motorola option that's been presented, which will include all of the negotiations with Motorola, the C800 equipment, including the potential transfer of said equipment back to Motorola so that it can become part of the package, partnership with WCN, the portable radio component of, and tower integration of that in partnership again with Federal and WCN to make all of that stuff happen to fix all of our radio problems henceforth, forever and ever. Is there any further discussion on this? And if we had a bottle of champagne, I'd get a guy to crack it here if we ever actually get to a yes on this. Mr. Anderson.
And speaking of, for discussion still.
Yes.
Couple questions. Just wanted to verify, how many members are there on the advisory committee? Just
You'll
double
have to ask your
checking. 'cause we
advisory
have-
committee chair.
How many agencies are represented?
12.
Because we have 15 votes.
What's our count? Is it 12 or 13?
So I was just looking
Oh,
at that,
yeah,
actually.
Joe's counting.
I was looking at the rules and regulations of the committee. And I'm assuming these are up to date. I don't know for sure, but we have 5 with at least 1 representative fire, 1 representative law enforcement. So this says 5, so. But we operate as each member agency has a vote. That's how we operate.
Right.
So as far as number of agencies, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17.
Okay.
Correct. That's the number I got.
Okay. So we're all square
So
with
200
that vote.
votes. Yep.
Okay.
I got another process suggestion, okay? I'm
He's
sorry,
the chair
I'm
now.
trying
He's
to-
the chair.
I'm trying to, so you got a vote.
Oh.
It-
Jerry, point of order. I would, I would appreciate your input. However, we're in discussion on a motion that's in front of this board.
I apologize to the chair.
So we got to follow through with that. Further discussion on the motion. Hearing none.
I just want to advise, or say that the board has heard, and the end users and the committee will definitely be heavily involved in ensuring that the RFP does have a performance bid spec for coverage. That message is received loud and clear.
Is there further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right. Do all that stuff and do it fast and make it cheap and make all these folks happy and serve our public well. That's what we're going to do. All right? Okay. Thank you all for your input. This is very important. Glad we finally got here. Okay. Other items of business before we adjourn. Agenda items. Does anybody have anything for the February 23rd meeting that needs to be discussed here today? Hearing none. Other business or member comments? Mr. Anderson?
SDO conference coming up, correct?
Next month. Shelley?
Just glad we came to some solution and hopefully it makes everybody happy in the end.
Yeah.
Appreciate everybody's time, and it's nice to finally get some direction and moving forward.
I'd just like to say that I know that, and we've got some forward movement here, but I'd also like to point out that you know, the city of Scappoose has put a lot of energy into this discussion, and the whole, you know, whether it was solicited or unsolicited and all this other stuff, doesn't make a lot of difference to me, other than the fact that the conversation got started and it got reinvigorated and it got people in the room, and there was energy because of that. So regardless of whether we end up with anything to do with Tate or no Tate or whatever, I would just have to say that the work that the city put into this, and the school district's input, and reaching out to the state senator and representatives and all those people that have come into this room, I'd say, you know what, thank goodness, because the bottom line is this board, as most boards around the county, suffer from a lack of anybody paying a bit of damn attention, and we come here and we're lonely, and we don't get a lot of input. So whatever it takes to get people involved and engaged and asking the questions and all that kind of thing is all okay, and it's all good. And so, Alex, I appreciate that, and you can pass that on, that I don't think that all of that was, all that energy was wasted at all. Quite the opposite, I think. Anything else from staff?
No, sir.
Okay, with that, Mike, unless you have anything else for the advisory committee, I guess we'll just go ahead and adjourn the whole shooting match.